Welcome. This is the San Francisco End of Life Network, and we are today having a conversation with David Palmer. David Palmer has been in the field of massage and touch for over 45 years. He has been recognized as the father of seated chair massage, and in 2007, he was inducted into the Massage Therapy Hall of Fame. From 1982 to 1989, he was director of the Amma Institute, which is the first school in the United States exclusively devoted to traditional Japanese massage. And as a colleague of Irene Smith, he has been entrusted with her archive of teaching materials. And David, thank you so much for joining us. He is coming in from the East Coast. Welcome, David.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Connie.
Good. So, David, let's start a bit at the beginning. Would you like to share a little bit about your first, how you became interested in massage and what you now call positive touch and being a touch advocate? So, want to give us a little bit of some of that background so we
Sure.
can put it in context?
Some of it's retrospective. I always say, everybody who goes to massage school has multiple intentions, some conscious and some unconscious. And certainly plenty of mine were unconscious at the time that I went to massage school in 1980 at the what at that time was called the Kabuki Shiatsu School in San Francisco in Japantown. And I had just received a massage at their facility, the Kabuki Hot Spring facility, and I had been interested in exploring massage as a way of dealing with my own physical infirmities, which is a kind of a typical pathway of introduction into massage. But then, as I have grown over the years and reflected over many seasons about my relationship to massage, I realized that what I was really seeking was touch, was the value and the benefits of touch in its many and varied forms. And and I can remember as far back as being a child and the kind of cuddling that happened with my mother and my father, mostly with my mother, but also the hugging and whatnot that went on parentally with my father, and then also realizing the moment when that went away. I was very well aware that there was some sort of a line that was drawn. This is back in the 50s, of course, when it was no longer appropriate to cuddle with your boys. There were 5 boys in my family, and 1 girl. Wow. And, so there was some sort of unspoken line that was drawn. And I remember that vividly because that has, of course, influenced, my relationship to touch or lack of relationship to touch. And I was raised in a very loving family. I was raised, with the optimism of feeling like the world is a supportive place, not a frightening place. So I didn't have much in the way of trauma brain, as we know it these days. But that experience of having touch withdrawn and also having the social, becoming aware of the social strictures against touch in our culture, which have gone up and down throughout the years. We recently went through a very down period with COVID, of course, where touch was not allowed at all. And we're kind of still recovering from that. But even before that, there's always been a lot of social injunctions against affectionate touch, particularly in Western cultures. But in most cultures, there's always this line of touch being sensual. And a spectrum of sensuality that includes sexuality on one end, and I don't know, maybe you could call it, medical touch. The most the most non-sensual version of touch on the other end, and then there's a whole lot of stuff in between. So I became interested in the subject of touch, and actually that became that realization was that was my primary interest. Was not in massage, even though I later took over the massage school that I trained at, and I later developed the seated massage protocols, and eventually in 1986, the first seated massage chair. It was always, from early on, I was pretty well aware that the work that I was doing was trying to change cultural attitudes about touch and introduce positive touch that was safe and convenient and in terms of the massage profession, affordable. And that, of course, is what led me to working with chair massage. And that has been professionally the primary focus of my life since about 1989. The other interest that I have, just in general, I have two missions in my life as a social change artist, and the second one is helping provide people with meaningful work. So both of those, for me, positive touch and meaningful work happen through the massage profession.
Wow. David, so much energy. That's wonderful to hear. Say more about that part of the social change agent and the cultural attitudes. Where do you think you have levered that part in terms of making some changes?
Well, I think, the wonderful thing about touch is that it's enough. Let's just start there. Touch is enough. In the massage profession in the 1980s decided that what was needed was to transform the image of massage into massage therapy. I appreciated that, and I think it's done a lot of good in terms of changing the cultural image of massage. But my issue was always not in making massage acceptable to the general public, that is to say, something other than massage parlor imagery that came on board, but rather to make it accessible. That massage, because it is structured, it's highly structured, it's a safe way to receive touch, but it also needs to be convenient and affordable, and thus my interest in developing chair massage as a vehicle, as a container for safe structured touch. So that worked very well for me. But when I met Irene Smith, or when I became aware of her work through Ken Bridgman, who is on this call as well, who was one of her colleagues early on, and I don't know how many people know about Irene Smith in this particular call, but she was the first one. She was a protege of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, living in San Francisco, and Elizabeth encouraged her to go to massage school, which she did. And then in the early days of the AIDS crisis in the 1990s, she was the first one to bring massage into the AIDS ward at San Francisco General Hospital, or any AIDS ward anywhere. She was really a groundbreaking figure in both massage and end of life and hospice care, and bringing touch into that world. Once I got introduced to her, I became a colleague and a friend, and I consider her my primary mentor around touch, because that was clearly her focus, and helped me define my focus more clearly for my work as well. And it was deepening my understanding of my own work with massage, by framing it in a context of well, the biggest context probably would be relationship or connection. Now, the amazing thing about touch is that it is a physical manifestation of relationship. When you touch somebody else, there's no question but what you are in a relationship, obviously, and it doesn't require words. It is a universal language. And it's the first language that we have, sensory motor net language that we have when we're still in the womb. And it is one of the last, probably, if not the last with hearing to go when people are exiting this mortal coil. And so it is a language that is universal, that cuts across all cultures, all socioeconomic strata. It's something that is a way to manifest a positive relationship that is built in to our actually built into our genetic model. I don't know if most of you know that it was just announced an hour ago or so that Jane Goodall just passed away.
Yes.
Oh, no, I didn't hear that.
And she is somebody who I have followed partly because of her deep examination, exploration, and insights into primate relationships. And one of the things that she discovered was the importance of touch as a not just nurturing, which of course all primates have to do when their children are born, but also in developing social bonds the same way. And the grooming instinct, which is very clear in primates, is something that's also hardwired into humans as well. We have the grooming instinct. It's manifest nowadays in things like, haircuts, skincare, nail salons, massage. Those are all part of the grooming instinct. But it's also goes even deeper in that in terms of the need that we have for connectedness, for social connectedness, whether it be reassurance, a pat on the back, whether it be affirmation, a handshake to seal a deal, whether it be, a hug, for affection. There's many different versions of touch, and we now understand that it is totally hardwired into who we are. We cannot live without touch. And I was interested in the one participant who was mentioning about feeling a lack of touch in our lives.
Yes.
One of the things I always remember, I'll just give you this little anecdote from Irene. Every morning, she used to say, I put on my skin every morning. And she did that by touch, through stroking, through different forms of tools that she might use. I do the same thing. Before I get out of bed every morning, I take a yoga strap and I work on the bottoms of my feet, rub the bottoms of my feet. I work between every toe. I work around the legs on both sides. I stretch out my legs before I get out of bed. And then I sit up and I do my shoulders and I do my back and I do my neck and I do my head. And one of my favorite parts of the early morning routine is just brushing my hair. All ways of stimulating skin stimulation, which is so necessary from my point of view in living a healthy, awake life. We are sensational human beings. We are full of sensation. And I think one of the healthiest things that we can do for ourselves and each other is to wake up those sensations through touch. Our largest organ in our body is our skin. And the more we take care of it, the more we stimulate it, the more circulation of many different kinds that happens inside of our body. Now, when somebody else touches us, okay, then there's a whole nother dynamic that we engage with. We get an immediate hit of, if it's positive touch, we get an immediate hit of oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone. It's the reason now why we can definitively say that you feel better after a massage, after a positive massage experience. In the past, we didn't know that 20, 30 years ago. We didn't know the mechanism for feeling good. Well, one of them is clearly a hit of oxytocin to the brain. And another is that positive touch stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is throughout your whole body. It's the relaxation response. It's the opposite of the stress response, the sympathetic nervous system response. So when you experience positive touch, immediately your parasympathetic system begins to be activated, and you relax and you feel better. You realign your whole nervous system into rest, recovery, relaxation mode. And of course, then you feel better as a result of that. So we now understand more about the actual physiological benefits of touch, and those apply so beautifully in dealing with people at end of life, where communication is, not always verbal. Oftentimes it isn't verbal, but it is a way of, touch is a way of expressing love. It's a way of expressing caring. It's something that I think that all relatives, should be encouraged to do. Be it a little hand massage or a little washcloth across the brow, any form of touch, caring touch is going to have a positive impact on the person who's in distress. And that's a kind of another piece of the universality of touch, is that you don't have to be sick for it to be valuable. You don't have to be well. Touch is always appropriate. The only contraindication that I know of for touch is somebody who doesn't want to be touched. And in my experience, those folks are few and far between. Most people, if they perceive it as positive touch, that I think will always define the quality of the relationship. Now, what I teach, and a lot of this comes from Irene Smith, or my synthesis of the lessons that I've learned from Irene. There are three elements that are necessary in every touch relationship. The first one is permission. Knowing that you have permission. And Irene, for example, even at the bedside of somebody who was comatose, she would always ask for permission and tell the person where she was going to be touching them. And just this, whether they could hear or not, just this acknowledgement of a relationship was beginning. It would be a relationship that would involve or be based on touch, and so now we have a starting point. It's just like anything else, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. The middle is always about feedback, and again, you can ask people verbally for feedback about their experience of the touch, and if they prefer a different place, a different pressure, a different kind of touch, whatever is appropriate for the moment. Those are the things that you pay attention to during the touch session. And the last thing is the ending, and the ending is always bathed in gratitude.
Mm.
So, and again, you can verbally say, um, uh, thank you for sharing this time with me. Because remember, every time you're touching someone, they're touching you back.
Mm.
And there have been plenty of studies done to show that there's great benefit to being the giver of touch as well as the receiver of touch. And we get the same hormonal and neurological releases when we do touch as when we receive touch. So you do have hopefully gratitude for what I consider to be a pretty sacred moment or moments or time that we spend together. And acknowledging that at the end, I think, is an important part of the touch relationship. So those are the three parts that I put forward, suggest that people be aware of: permission, feedback, and gratitude, acknowledgement at the end.
Mm.
Now, Irene would always, of course, she was the exemplar of not only all three of those, but she was also the exemplar of presence.
Mm.
Okay. So as a touch giver, holding space, holding the space through touch for the relationship, for the connection that happens with the other person. I don't know. I don't know of anything more precious than that. And there are many ways to do that, and we do it all throughout our lives, mostly unconsciously. But her argument was always to make the unconscious conscious, to pay attention, to name it, to say presence is something that's important. And how do I become grounded in this moment? Through my breath, through taking a moment of awareness, of expanding awareness. Whatever those tools are that we need to be in the moment, meditation, of course, and related practices, so critical to holding the space for the relationship. And and then kind of the last thing I wanted just to highlight is the fact that this is something more. This is something very existential that we're kind of working with here. When we say we're having a relationship, and we mean we're connecting, making a physical, mental, psychological, emotional connection with another person. In its best form, it makes us more whole. So I can always remember, I can always bring to mind what it feels like for me to get a massage, for example, or have positive touch. It makes me feel integrated. It makes the left brain talk with the right brain. We live in a left brain culture primarily. Well, during a massage, your right brain wakes up and the corpus callosum, they start talking to each other. And that's one of the reasons that I think that we feel a little disoriented for about 5 minutes after a massage, is because we are in right brain consciousness. We're in the consciousness of wholeness. We're in the consciousness of flow. We're in the consciousness of universality, of connectedness, of total connectedness. Our brains are talking with our bodies. We've become more integrated. We've woken up. We've realized how sensational we are everywhere in our body, everywhere in our being. And it's an exciting feeling. It's a feeling that we don't often allow ourselves to have. It's a feeling that we strive for when we're meditating or doing yoga or doing some other disciplines. We're striving for that kind of wholeness, unity, universal connectedness sensation. So even on what I would call a spiritual level or spirit level, the non-physical level, I think, we are offering a space, particularly at the end of life, in hospice care. We're offering a space where people can make a transition, from this material world, into whatever is next. And we don't know exactly what's next until we get there, but it allows space for us to experience it as a new sensation, included in our consciousness, for evermore.
Whew. Wow, David. Well, I certainly saw the prayer hands go up in many places. Thank you so much. So much to digest, and I'm sure people will have questions. But I guess I have one area to go back to. You mentioned people who do say no, or you're hitting some ambivalence. Can you just step back a moment and maybe talk about that situation a bit more so that those of us in fields where people can see that there'd be benefit, but perhaps you're hitting that piece of no, I don't think so, or tell me more. How do you work with that kind of individual and setting?
Well, I think the idea of permission is critical there, and uh, and being able to know, the appropriate boundaries. Boundaries, have long been a discussion of the importance of safety in a relationship, and certainly most recently during the Me Too movement, we had a kind of a whole nother explosion of interest in boundaries. In massage, it's always been an issue and of concern. But in daily life, it's being able to read the moment, the situation. Now, from Irene's point of view, the touch began with the eyes, with the connection with the eyes. So making a connection, you know, even before you physically touch somebody, I think is critically important for them to feel comfortable with any amount of touch. There's professional touch. I just was at the dentist the past 3 days, and I love it when they lean against me against the shoulder, or they have to touch, touching your mouth and whatnot. It's it's totally appropriate, and it's not unexpected and whatnot. But I also love when in passing, I was zooming with somebody, actually my therapist, and somebody came to the door to deliver a package, and I came back and he said, "Well, I noticed how you touched the FedEx guy, just on the shoulder. It's just." And I think mostly we can get away with that as well too. And it's kind of a way of just acknowledging and saying thank you, and goodwill. So you definitely have to read the situation. Some people, of course, are think they don't want to be touched, and shouldn't be touched. For example, working with women who are in abuse shelters. So maybe a shoulder massage coming up behind them is too vulnerable, too much vulnerability for them. But maybe standing in front and asking if they'd like to receive a hand massage is not. Okay. So there's this, touch, a touch relationship, any relationship requires a level of vulnerability. So it's how much vulnerability is possible in this situation, and respecting those boundaries. Those are the boundaries that I'm most interested in, are the boundaries of people's personal vulnerability. Laying down naked on a massage chair behind closed doors with another person in the room, very vulnerable. Sitting in a massage chair fully clothed out in the open, less vulnerable. And sitting in a regular chair and somebody just rubbing your shoulders, even less vulnerable. And standing in front and giving a hand massage or an arm massage, a little bit of touch, even less vulnerability. A handshake requires vulnerability. It requires, permission. And so we're always unconsciously exploring the boundaries of every every relationship as it relates to touch.
And I just saw in the chat someone posted that a person with scleroderma may find touch painful.
Yeah, I think burns. I always think that there's probably a place on their body where touch is appropriate, and if there is no place because of physical conditions they have, then do Reiki work, where you don't have to touch them at all, but you're physically touch them, but you can share this moment of closeness, and truly it's intimacy. And that's one of the things that people have difficulty with around touch is that, yeah, it's a clear manifestation of relationship, but it's a particular kind of relationship. Touch, no matter how much you scrub it, the sensuality away from it, it's an intimate level of relationship, and that's, of course, what people are challenged by most often is that idea of intimacy. Male massage practitioners working on male customers, or male on female. I mean, it could be anything. I'll never forget when we first went down to work at Apple Computer in the early 1980s, massaging the folks who are creating the Macintosh computer on drummer stools and getting the feedback from a couple of women who said, "This is the first time I've been touched in my life without sex being involved." Touched by another man non-sexually, by a man non-sexually, which is, mind-boggling. And I hope, we are mostly through those days, but I'm afraid we're not quite there yet.
And someone just commented in the chat too about just to put lotion on a hand or to rest one's hand on another is incredible to
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Somebody was noting working in prisons. Irene offered touch in prisons, and one time I substituted for her at one of the prisons in California, and it was working with some of the folks who worked in the hospice end of the prison, with the people at end of life, and it was quite moving. And they had to be very careful, and and work around the rules and regulations. But one of the things that I always think is so important is that touch, when you touch, it needs to be with intention. And this was definitely one of Irene's messages as well. I spoke one time at a cosmetology, at a estheticians convention in Paris, the home of estheticians, skincare and whatnot. And I had one message to them in my talk, and that was, you're touching people in your profession. If you add intentionality to your touch, then people will want your touch. They'll want to come back for more of that. It's the intentionality that people love. It's the presence, the awareness, the sensation of this is somebody who is paying attention to this moment of connection that we're having. And it's the best marketing you can do is to bring intentionality into your touch if you have that in your personal care service profession.
Wow, David, so much. I'm going to, with intention, acknowledge that there are probably people who want to open up their mics and ask questions.
David, my name is Susan Barber, and I work with the Humane Prison Hospice Project. And I also was Irene's sort of organizer, her power of attorney. And I think you and I were in contact in the last couple of months of her life. But Irene gave one of our co-founders permission to use her material. So we have a whole module in our very long 500-page training for palliative care, end-of-life care, and working with seniors in prison environments. And we've trained, I guess, 140 people, yeah, in California to date in the last
Wow.
2 years. And I have to say that this module, the only people that have a worse relationship to touch than sort of the general public would be people who are incarcerated, and particularly in the women's prisons. And to watch people like sit there and listen to this information and like hear about Irene's work at the AIDS unit and with other people, and then to do her exercises, some of the exercises that she brought, it's probably one of the most moving days for me in our training to watch people like just go right up to their edge with touch, and then be willing to step over that edge and see that there are ways to touch people that are not harmful, and to watch people overcome their fear, because a lot of people that we work with are in prison because they've murdered somebody, and that touch, to transform that to something that is life-giving and positive, and then to go into the units and see them working with their patients and how vital touch is to the people that come into their units, particularly in the memory care and dementia units. It's just such an incredible gift. I cannot tell you how grateful I am for having known Irene and for her giving us permission to bring this, because it really unlocks a door for people that are incarcerated, that allows the grief and like the trauma care and the rest of it to be taken in and heard and processed in just an incredible way.
That's so beautiful, Susan. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it really, yeah, I mean, the working with people who come from a place of trauma, which is virtually everybody who's incarcerated at this point. We now understand about the adverse childhood experiences and
Talk about those.
what it does to the brain, and there is a wiring problem. There's a real biological, neurological wiring problem. And to take the baby steps, to shift people's experience of the world as being a dangerous place into being one that is a place of nurturing positivity, of joy, is no small task, and it's no short-term task. So we take baby steps toward moving in that direction. And the work that you're doing, the work that Irene started in the prisons, is definitely God's work, and I congratulate you for keeping it going. I'm so happy to know that it's still perpetuated.
Please. I want to say also this thing about traumatization, like people that go to prison were traumatized for sure, but then they're traumatized every single day of their life there. And so many of them have tried to kind of think their way out of it, or study, or learn like a lot. Like if you, like some of the people we've worked with, remarkable. They know so much about ACEs, about traumatization, but you can't think your way out of trauma. So it's in the body, and to be able to have a way, like we talk about self-soothing with, your hands, we do a couple of like anchoring your heart, and just the different touch things that Irene would talk to us about. That is the thing that can break down that barrier and get them to the other side of recovering really, or integrating that trauma in a way that is like post-traumatic growth. And that is just a miracle. So thank you.
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Lynn, hello.
Thank you so much. I just want to acknowledge, first of all, that I really am deeply moved by your comment that touch begins with the eyes, right? Like having the connection and seeing, the person before you even get to the place of, asking for permission. That's super, super beautiful. And the presence, right? Just being in present moment and knowing why you're doing. So thank you so much, David, for those comments. In my experience, I've had some really, really beautiful moments with touch. I had a client with Lewy body dementia, and of course, with permission, just combing her hair and putting her clips in was such a gorgeous moment. Just really heart opening. I've also had times where, with another gentleman who had dementia, I've asked permission. One time it was okay, the next visit it wasn't okay. Um, and what I recognize is that in the training that I've had, both spiritual direction and end of life doula, there's not a lot of training on using touch. In fact, the hospice training really didn't, go into that so much at all. And they gave us one kind of pro tip that I'll um, share. And my question really is, do you have other pro tips? And that was, when somebody's really in their last moments, sometimes sliding your hand underneath theirs as opposed to on top of it, so that that weight, right, is not, you're not weighting their hand down, weighting their body. But do you have other kind of pro tips, if you will, for really in those last moments when you can connect beautifully, spiritually, heartfeltly with a person who's at end of life?
Well, I love that one, and I think it's um, a way of allowing the person being touched to be a little bit more in control, of the pressure, the connection that's happening. So I really do love that. But there's, I don't know of any. I don't have a particular list of other hints other than what I've talked about in terms of intention and presence. And you can touch one of the things that I would like to just emphasize is the importance of giving other people permission to touch as well, family members and friends, because modeling, a little hand massage or shoulder rub or just repositioning, helping to reposition somebody, is a form of touch and giving comfort, to them, finding a better set of pillows underneath their head or their shoulders or whatever. Um, uh, the feet, are often overlooked. I many times have. Um, so I'll tell you a little bit about my experience with end of life touching. So when my partner was sick and dying, every morning I gave him a massage on a table, and it was a rocking massage. I do acupressure, I do Japanese massage, so that can be kind of invasive. So I do a kind of adapted it and did more of a rocking with some pressure points. That was how he began his day. At the end of his day, I would give him a leg and a foot massage when he was in bed, and that's how he finished the day until the day he died, the night he died. My second direct experience, personal experience, was with my mother, who was 90 when I moved out here to Connecticut. And she was starting to get more debilitated in her life. Every night for 9 years, she passed away when she was 99. Every night, I would give her a chair massage, a 20-minute massage in a massage chair. And then she'd sit in her recliner and I'd give her a leg massage and foot massage. And then I'd finish up with a hand massage. Now, this is somebody who, when I moved out here, I didn't, I thought maybe I would be here for 1 or 2 years because she was kind of in decline. Well, she lived for 9 years, and they were some of the best years of my life. I can't tell you how grateful I was for the intimacy that we shared through touch and just living in the same complex and whatnot, and seeing her every day. The level of connection. And we weren't on this. I mean, I'm a child of the 50s and 60s. She's a child of the Depression. We didn't have, in many ways, a whole lot in common in terms of our perspectives and consciousness and whatnot. But we shared so much in that time, and it didn't require. I like the, Susan's notes about, it doesn't require mentally figuring something out. It just requires being there, being with the other person, and just sitting in silence with a hand on a hand is sometimes enough, and just doing that intentionally. And people are just, I think we're all just craving for connection, for connectedness, for a sense of connectedness internally and then externally as well. It's a kind of a validation. When you touch somebody, you're saying you exist. You validate their existence, and wow, that's pretty awesome to gift to be able to give to another person, is just to validate that you are a real person in this world, even if you're in the midst of transitioning to another world. At this moment, that you exist, you're worthwhile. This is unconditional. There are no strings attached to this relationship. I mean, I think we call that love, I think.
I think we do, Dave. That's beautiful. Wow. So we'll breathe for a moment while Paul unmutes himself and he has a question.
Oh, um, well, thank you. This topic is so reassuring on so many levels. And you reminded me of two things that in my private practice, I had a young male client who would often talk about his relational kind of issues or things that are challenging. And at one point, you remind me, it was found it funny. He found it easier to say, "Can I ask the person he was with, can I have a kiss?" But when I said, "Why don't you think about holding hands?" And that just I mean, he had a reaction that surprised me. And I'm like, holding hands was way too close. Then I thought on a scale of, well, maybe kissing and then holding hands. And it was just one thing you reminded me of, that touch is so different in many ways, where holding hands, it might. So I don't know if you have a comment around holding hands, and then I just have one other share too. But that was just something I found surprising as I was working with him, and I made a suggestion like that.
That is so interesting. I'm definitely not an expert on young people's touch habits, these days, and what's considered intimate and what's not. I do find that that's very interesting, and I'm glad you shared that, and I will pay some greater attention to that in my conversations with young people about that. But what different cultures consider to be intimate, whether it be rubbing noses or pats on the back or whatever, pats on the rear end of teammates is okay in that situation, but not in other situations. So we have lots of rules, unspoken rules around what's appropriate and what's not. So I'm always interested in hearing, and I thank you for sharing that, Paul.
Oh, well, thanks. And yeah, you just remind me about all those different other connections and touches. And just here at the Cancer Center, touch is really important. And you remind me how often, because I'm working with people with a illness, a disease, and they feel isolated. And what I've observed, with permission, as we touch these clients, either chairside if they're getting chemo or after a teach, the touch really just is a powerful recognition of them. And I so appreciate you validating its importance in treatment, in serving them and supporting them. I mean, other than all the other things we're doing, or the other folks that are here, and we're a very touchy crowd. And so I appreciate you validating that. I think we should incorporate it.
They once did a study of the NFL teams who had more on-field touch between teammates, players, won more than the ones who didn't.
Thank you, Paul. Brannigan.
Thank you for your talk. And one of the things I love about being with my grandchildren is that we touch. I mean, certainly when they're born and they're little, there's a lot of touch. But they cuddle, they play. And I have an 11-year-old granddaughter whose body is changing, and I really appreciate you talking about permission, about where I can touch her and what kind of pressure. Thank you.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a whole movement that you may be aware of, that's called the cuddle movement, where mostly millennials and younger and whatnot are get together and they just do puppy parties or pajama parties or on a one-on-one. There are some folks who actually provide cuddle services for people professionally, non-sexual, but clearly a level of intimacy that people need, touch intimacy that they need. It's become a whole profession, and it's continuing to expand. I'm in touch with a number of groups across the country that meet regularly, and it includes everything from sex workers working with psychotherapists and doing sex therapy to intimacy coordinators on the sets of movies who are helping to make it safe for the actors who are in intimate scenes, and that is a profession already. So it's from one end of that spectrum to the other, and a lot in between that is happening with non-massage touch. It's very interesting, and so I kind of try to keep track of that as well.
Thank you, David. Ken.
One of the things, you talked about the impact is as much on the giver as the receiver, and I went around the world for quite some time in a workshop, and the primary focus of the workshop is working on the giver. You can't give what you don't have, and when somebody's happening out there, it does impact you, and all of this stuff in you starts coming out. People, burnout. She talked a lot about burnout. Well, burnout's just you not taking care of yourself. You haven't looked inside first, And, so her workshops were largely helping people to discover that there's a lot of work they have to do. Thank you so much, David.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Good seeing you, Ken.
And David, there's one last question, I believe, in the chat. Can you talk about fascia, I guess?
No.
No? That's a whole other
topic
subject.
of conversation. I'm trying to remember that one has come up in about the past 10 years. But there's something else I'm trying to think of that's even more recent than that. But let me just say that the point of fascia and the big revelation is that everything's connected physically. That all parts of us are connected to every other part of us, and there has always been a trend in Western urban medicine toward finding, taking things apart rather than seeing things as a whole. One of the things I like about the discussions of fascia that have been happening in the past 10 years in the bodywork fields, the physical therapy fields, and whatnot, is that it's just making it's giving name to something that's always been true, which is that everything's connected. So every nerve, every muscle, every part of every organ in our body is surrounded by fascial tissue, and it's all it's all ultimately connected in one way or another. We're continue the whole. We haven't talked much about the physiology of touch, but just in the past. Probably, well, in the past 10 years as well, there's been the discovery of these, what are called the letter C, afferent nerves in the skin, which are respond to soft touch, and they connect directly to our emotional, vestibules. And so, there's a whole fields of study now developing around the nervous system and the role of touch in our emotional and psychological health after the discovery of these C afferent nerve cells, these new type of nerve cells. So, we're constantly making new strides and new discoveries in how things actually work. We in the West, we love the explanation. We need to know, what's the cause, how does it happen? So, as I was mentioning earlier, the discovery of the importance of oxytocin in positive touch and the stimulation of the parasympathetic nervous system and the reduction in cortisol that positive touch brings about. Those are all well worth knowing, and they're all explanations for what we know to be true, which is that touch makes you feel better.
Thank you so much, David.